Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Axion.
I'm Sint.
We are continuing our discussion of Terry Pratchett's Hogfather and battling Gym Leader Clair in Pokemon Christmas. So, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you when someone mentions the Grim Reaper?
See, this is not a good question to ask while we're doing this series because I have been so thoroughly polluted by Discworld that that's what I think of.
You know what, that's fair.
Tell me again how the little horse-shaped ones move.
Well, that plan didn't work. I was hoping that I could get... So, then allow me to specify, outside the context of Discworld, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Blue Oyster Cult.
Okay, that's actually very appropriate, considering where I was going. So obviously, in that case, you are familiar with one of their most well-known songs, Don't Fear the Reaper.
Yep.
I trust you are aware of what that song is actually about.
The JFK assassination.
Wait, really?
No. It was just a perfect setup to say something completely off the wall.
Well, congratulations? You caught me off guard. The song is actually about a, I believe, young woman contemplating the results of her inevitable death and the possibility of, to use language that's not going to freak out YouTube, achieving that at an early rate.
Ah, gotcha. Which I don't think is quite the aim of how people normally talk about the idea of not being afraid of death.
Yeah. But the fear of death is one of the most well-known, oldest, and primal terrors that humans have faced of all time. It is a fear that has existed since humans could feel fear. It's a completely understandable, ingrained behavior and emotional reaction, given, you know... Hi, puppy. Gonna give her a little bit to settle the dog.
Okay, I think we're good for now.
Any idea what she was barking at?
General existence.
That's completely fair. So yeah, humans have pretty much always, for completely understandable reasons, been afraid of death.
Yeah, there's no coming back from it.
A big part of death's arc throughout Discworld is coming to understand as a being what it means for humans to interact with death, and coming to comprehend how humans and death are involved with one another.
So yeah, and we do see pretty thoroughly, Death, as far as Discworld is concerned, does not want to be an enemy.
Yep, he likes humans. He sees his place in the world as a necessity, and what he does is, in many cases, as much of a boon as it is a... I don't want to say punishment, but just a negative result. And we've seen in prior books the opposite of this. The death that arose to replace death in Reaper Man absolutely wanted to be seen as a fearful entity to lord power over mortal creatures and to be feared and respected, and, well, they mistook fear for respect. Let's put it that way. Which is not an uncommon situation. And using fear as that method of influence, control, and as a wrench to extract respect from people is not in any way an uncommon behavior. It's something used by the worst kinds of people, even in the current day. Oh, hello. How very kind of you, Game Maker. Oh, that's not a computer, it's just a radio. Never mind. And anyway, to continue that thought, nowhere in this book is that more obvious than Tea Time himself. Tea Time absolutely wants to be feared. He refers to himself as various different terms associated with fear throughout the course of the book. He calls himself your worst nightmare at one point. He calls himself the monster under the bed. Do you remember any others? I'm drawing a blank beyond that.
Not offhand.
But yeah, you know what the kind of thing I'm talking about. He is interested in being seen as a being to be afraid of, and uses that fear to hold power over his underlings and over the people he encounters in the Tooth Fairy's tower. Ah, boo, I missed. There we go. Contrast this with Susan. Susan does not want to stoke fear. And as much as she's being contrasted against Tea Time for this, she's also contrasted against her predecessor as the children's governess. The prior governess is stated to have used fear tactics of telling the children that bad things will happen to them if they disobey, or if they don't follow the rules, or if they don't do their chores, or whatever else. And we see that this is tied into the appearance of the various childhood fear creatures later in the story, such as the Scissor Man, Banjo, and the other guy's mother, so on and so forth. These entities are conjured from childhood fears that were used to keep the children in line by threatening them with punishment. And within the influence of the Tooth Fairy's tower, those fears resurfaced and took on a life of their own, fueled by the spare belief created from the absence of Hogfather.
Yep.
But Susan doesn't operate this way, and she has an understandable disdain for people who do. When the children come to her with fears, she doesn't dismiss them, but she also doesn't use those fears to control them or to demean them. She acknowledges those fears as reasonable, and then teaches the children how to do something about it. The children fear the monsters fear the poker. And the children learn that if they are prepared for the dangers that they fear, that they don't need to be as afraid because they have been taught how to handle them. A large portion of human fear is the result of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. Humans are most afraid of the things they don't know. Thus, the best way to combat that fear is with knowledge, is with knowing. Once you know, once you are aware and educated about the thing that you feared, it's less scary. A big part of why death is feared is because it's the ultimate unknown. When you die, you have no idea what's going to happen next, because there's no way to get that information from one side back to the other. Some people have beliefs or faith or their own understandings, but it's impossible to 100% know, because there's no way for knowledge from the other side of that transition to travel back.
Something else that's interesting about this, looking at Susan's charges, is knowledge does not only help conquer fear, knowledge helps them reverse the fear. They start weaponizing what Susan has taught them, to the point where Susan has to tell them, stop doing things to deliberately summon the monsters so I'm obligated to beat them up. That's not nice. They are tired of being afraid, and when you have been made to be afraid of something for so long, there's a very strong sense of adrenaline and power from being able to force the person who made you afraid to feel that same fear, which can lead to vicious cycles if not carefully handled.
Yep. And we see this with Tea Time, once again. Tea Time weaponized fear to get his work done, and he kept his underlings in line with that fear. How much do you want to bet? It's never straight up stated in the text, but it seems completely reasonable to me that already being in a fearful arrangement of power only further intensified the ability of the Tooth Fairy to get its hooks into his minions and start dispatching them as swiftly as it did, calling upon their childhood fears from the fact that they were already in a state of fearful obedience to Tea Time. That's, of course, just a theory on my part. It's not outright stated, but it seems like a completely reasonable course of events to me. Stop recovering. Thank you. So as a result, Tea Time loses his entire gang. He went in there with what, like 6 people?
Something like that. And all but one of them get killed by their own fears, and the last one just, stops listening to him.
Yep. How much different do you think things might have been if these people were legitimately loyal to Tea Time? If he'd made the time and effort to build up their allegiance and their cooperation with him to the point where they were following him because they believed in what he was doing or because they agreed with his methods or whatever, instead of just because he hired them and then threatened them to keep them in line and killed people in front of them to keep them afraid.
In all honesty, I don't think that would have happened because that wouldn't have been Tea Time.
Well,
Tea Time was the person he was because he was unable to relate to people in any means other than fear. Tea Time had all this time to think of these elaborate assassination plans because he did not relate to others and therefore spent basically all of his time off by himself.
That is also completely fair.
Yeah, I think we would not have had this story if Tea Time was actually capable of being a normal person who could relate to others.
Yep, or if he had learned, even as someone who did not have that natural inclination, if he had learned to behave in a way that was not so thoroughly reliant on that kind of interaction. Because there are people who have that sort of natural inclination to not really share an emotional connection with other humans, but they learn how to exist peacefully with them in a society of people built on mutual cooperation. Even if they don't feel those particular emotions, they still learn that it is beneficial to them and to society as a whole to follow those patterns. But Tea Time, unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for all of the people who he led to their deaths, had found a niche in society where he was able to stick to his own inclinations without taking the well-being of others and of general society into account, by finding his place in the Assassin's Guild, where his eccentricities were tolerated.
Yep. In a sense, there's also another very minor character that I think looks at the idea of using fear as a weapon. The king. That one king who bullies this poor man into, I want you to accept my scraps so I can be seen as such a good person, and you can't argue with me because you know what will happen if you backsash the king.
Yeah, that's honestly an extremely well distilled example of many of the other fear-based relationships going on throughout the story, summarized down into a single interaction. The difference between what Tea Time's doing and what the king is doing is really little more than a matter of scope and speed. They're both essentially doing the same thing, just on different scales, and with slightly different methods.
Yep, do this thing, or you will face the consequences, and you're not gonna like it.
And we see for both of them that the first chance that someone who can stand against them does so, both of them crumble fairly quickly. Tea Time attempts to resist Susan with moderate success, but still ends up getting himself nearly killed. And the king is basically immediately stopped by Death's intervention. The instant someone who is essentially stronger than them steps in, their ability to enforce their power over someone else is completely subverted.
Because the king, for all his power, and Tea Time, for all his skill, can't beat Death. Death wins.
Yep. Because there is nothing that is stronger than Death.
Taxes?
Fair point.
Alright, I think that's probably a good place to leave this.
Yep. And we will continue this next time. See y'all then.
Bye.